Trevor and I were just discussing the weather is just all over the place.
It is, yeah. We had rain last week. We had severe weather last night. We've got winter weather coming back, it looks like, for the week ahead. Wednesday is the day we're watching, already a 31 alert day. Likelihood that we are going to pick up some frozen precipitation, some snow accumulations are possible, maybe not everywhere in North Alabama, but enough of us will be covered with that to cause some problems for the morning commute on Wednesday. Otherwise, it's a cold week ahead, chilly the next couple days, and then just plain cold the second half of the week, especially with those lows in the teens Thursday morning and again Friday morning. Should bounce back by the following week. Grace will be in tomorrow morning. She'll have the latest details on that winter weather threat.
All right, thanks so much, Jeff. Thank you, Trevor. WAAY 31 gives you 24/7 coverage. You can count on local news, breaking news, and severe weather. LawCall is next.
This is WAAY 31 Law Call.
Good evening and welcome to WAAY 31 Law Call. I'm Sharon Doviet. Tonight we are talking about education in Alabama. Now tomorrow most of the schools across the Tennessee Valley are closed for President's Day, but education is definitely in tonight. We're going to talk about some of the most important issues facing our education system. We're going to be talking about the proposed elimination of the Federal Department of Education and the possible impact on schools in Alabama. And then there's also the lawsuit that's been filed by 17 states, including Alabama, to eliminate or modify 504 plans that provide accommodations for students with disabilities. So we're talking about those things tonight. We welcome your questions or comments. You can call in. The 31 Law Call number is 256-536-0077. You can call in and be live on the air, or you can also text us questions or comments at that same number. You can also email us questions. You send email questions on any legal topic any day of the week. You send it to lawcall@waaytv.com, and when we get to a show that's on point, we pull some out. We've got some of your email questions tonight. And getting us started tonight, we've got Heath Brooks from Timberlake League and Brooks, and we've got Andrea Alvarez. She is a Huntsville City School Board member, District 3, 2.5 years on the board. Thank you very much for being here. In her daily life, she's a defense contractor. You're one of us. You're one of the North Alabama many. But in her free time, what little free time she has on the school board. So very interesting, some things that are going on in education. We look forward to hearing your thoughts.
Yeah.
Heath is very interested in this area.
Well, you know, I'm a parent.
Yes.
Like everyone else. I mean, like a lot of people in the Huntsville community and Madison County community and all of our watchers, I'm a parent too. And so, you know, we always want to do what's right for our kids and what's right for our community when we're talking about education. And anytime you have a big shakeup with education, people get concerned. People get scared. People have legal questions. What can I legally do to help my child? How is this going to impact my child? Who can I talk to? What do I need to do for my community? Who do I need to call? And so these are some of the questions that we have been faced with, and I've been taking actually a lot of calls about, with people asking me questions about what do I know and where can I direct them. And so, you know, that's what we're here tonight to do, is to answer whatever legal questions you may have about the educational changes that we may be facing nationwide and specifically in our Huntsville community. Yeah. You know, we're always here to answer any of your legal questions. Call us if you got any question at all, but tonight's focus is going to be about education.
Get us started on this. Okay, so what even is a 504 plan? I guess that's the most basic way to break it down. What is this?
It is. It's a section of the 1973 Rehabilitation Act, which allows people who have disabilities to have accommodations both in the education and the workforce.
Okay. What kind of accommodations would we be talking about?
So some more of the generic ones that people probably understand the most would be maybe having a sign language interpreter if they're hearing impaired, wheelchair ramps, accessible bathrooms. In the education field, all of those things are also applicable. We do have a significant section of our population in Huntsville that is hearing impaired, and so we do have sign language interpreters in certain schools because of that. But a lot of times it's simple things such as extra time on tests or the ability to take designated breaks during the day. So it's just things that help that student or that worker later in life to get through more comfortably.
And this lawsuit that's filed, I think filed back in September, is challenging Section 504, a federal law recognizing civil rights of individuals with disabilities. So what happens if we lose this? What are we talking about could happen?
You know, it's one of these strange times that there's been a bunch of different states that have lined up to challenge this particular statute on a couple of different levels. So Section 504 of the 1973 Rehabilitation Act, or Rehabilitation Act of 1973, really is the enforcement mechanism of that particular statute. So what ends up happening is that Section 504 requires the states to comply with the Rehabilitation Act, which is basically a law that says you cannot discriminate against somebody, or you have to allow them the same opportunity as everybody else who does not have a disability. So that means that if I have a disabling condition that is determined by a medical professional, I have to be given the same access in both the workplace and in the educational system under the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. So what ended up happening with this act is under the previous administration, under the Biden administration, one of the definitions in the Rehabilitation Act for what constitutes a disability, the definition for gender involving gender was changed to include a disability called gender dysphoria. Now, the specific lawsuit down in Texas deals with challenging what the Biden administration did to change the definition of a disability when it came to gender.
Okay.
The problem is that also as part of this lawsuit, the lawyers and the 17 states sought to find unconstitutional the entirety of Section 504. And that could be a very big concern for the several million children all over the United States that have 504 plans. And the reason for that is because if the district court judge down in Texas indicates that 504 is unconstitutional, then the requirement that a state provide access to disabled children under a 504 plan could go away.
Okay, we're talking about a lot of money, right? How does all of this play into funding and money?
So right now, Huntsville City Schools gets about 15% of their funding from the federal government, either via appropriations or grants that we apply for.
Okay.
What the 504 plan is right now is if we don't comply with it, we could potentially not get that funding. If the government decides to rule it unconstitutional, the impacts to how much funding that would adjust is to be known. I'm not sure what it could do to funding. I feel like we would still be a good steward of our employees and our students, and we would still do right by them without the funding and without the mandate. But what about the other school system? Or what about when these kids go to college or they go to the workplace, they suddenly lose those protections? So I think the fear is the lack of oversight is what my biggest concern would be, the lack of someone holding anybody accountable to do the right thing.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest concern with a lot of the folks that have spoken out about this particular lawsuit is that, hey, look, if I cannot get federal funds unless I comply with Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, then what ends up happening is I have what's basically an unfunded mandate, which is you got a law on the books, but no one has to follow it. So, in the state of Alabama, well, and it should be pointed out that Section 504 is the actual floor. It's not the ceiling. So many states across the nation have additional protections for children with disabilities and additional funding in their school systems that Alabama right now simply doesn't have. So one of the things that we may want to discuss is what type of opportunities could we have if Section 504 goes away through this lawsuit?
Yeah.
Now, what would have to happen practically is this district court judge down in Texas would rule Section 504 unconstitutional, then it would be appealed, maybe all the way up to the Supreme Court of the United States. Okay. So by the time it gets to the Supreme Court, maybe the Supreme Court agrees, maybe they don't. Okay. But in the meantime, all the school systems, including the state of Alabama, are in a state of flux about what to do.
What to do.
That's right.
You feel like the more urban schools are likely more geared up and able to handle these kind of problems, that it's going to, in circumstances like that, it would really probably be more of a rural school problem? Maybe?
I think so. I think the types of disabilities and the frequency that we see in Huntsville, we just have more exposure.
Okay.
I think, you know, the smaller the school system, the less exposure they have to the varying types of disabilities. I think another big fear is if we're going to argue the constitutionality of each individual quote-unquote disability, are we questioning doctors now? Are we questioning all the other disabilities? How disabled do you have to be?
Yeah.
Those are the type of questions that I think we're opening all this up to suddenly question someone's ability to be disabled. And I think that's a scary place to be in.
Because right now, who determines if you've got a disability? Do your teachers chime in on that? Is it got to be your doctor says what the problem is? Who designates which children have disabilities now?
Mm-hmm. It's typically a doctor, unless it's a learning disability,
Okay.
which our schools can diagnose a learning disability. But if it's a medical condition, my daughter has dyslexia. It is determined by a medical professional who can determine it. So, I mean, I just don't know what we would do if we suddenly start questioning a medical opinion.
And one of the things that this particular lawsuit down in Texas, it seeks to, the initial emphasis of this lawsuit, kind of lulled a bunch of people to sleep on, was the stated purpose of this lawsuit was that Biden era law that the particular states were seeking to invalidate. But tagged on to that is this other aspect of the complaint that seeks to find the whole system unconstitutional. And the way they do that is they say, you know, you cannot predicate federal funding. In other words, you can't stop me as a state from getting federal funding if I don't comply with this specific statute. That is unconstitutional. So, you know, this could have bigger implications beyond the educational system, obviously, because there's a lot of laws that are on the books of a federal level that the federal government does not give you money unless you comply with this particular statute. So it could have bigger implications down the line, but specifically in the arena of 504, they make specific arguments about why that statute should be invalidated. So the rippling effect that it could have and the uncertainty that it has for parents and for the educational community and for the teachers that are working hard to try to overcome already significant obstacles is a problem.
Would be a tough time to be a teacher right,
That's right.
now. We're going to take a break. We've got a couple of email questions, and we invite you to call in the 35 Law Call number 536-0077. You can call in, you can text in, and you can also email in. So we'll be right back answering more of your questions about education in Alabama. Stay with us.
You're watching WAAY 31 Law Call. Your rights, your calls, live. Presented by the Tennessee Valley's award-winning personal injury and wrongful death law firm, Timberlake, League & Brooks. Featuring the knowledge and experience of Attorney Michael Timberlake, Attorney Will League, Attorney Heath Brooks, Attorney William Maservi, and hosted by broadcaster and family law attorney Sharon Doviet. This is WAAY 31 Law Call.
Welcome back. Tonight we're talking about education in Alabama and some changes going on. We're talking about a proposed elimination of the Federal Department of Education. We're also talking about the lawsuit filed by 17 states, including Alabama, to eliminate or modify 504 plans. Okay, we got a text question in. What kind of disabilities do 504 plans cover? Are we talking about physical disabilities? And only physical disabilities?
No, it's actually any disability. So like I said, my daughter's dyslexic. It would cover her. So when she went to college, she'd be allowed to have extended time on tests. She'd be allowed to have study notes given to her by the teacher. There's just little things that you could advocate for that you can request that people have to provide.
And those are accommodations.
Those are
That's
called
what we're talking
accommodations.
about.
Yes.
Okay.
And you know, the interesting thing about the Section 504 and the Rehabilitation Act, which works in conjunction with the American with Disabilities Act, is that these statutes don't just cover the educational setting. Once you leave the educational setting, you have a 504 plan through your entire educational career, all the way up through college. But once you leave that setting and you move into the workplace, Section 504 actually protects you with a disability in the workplace. So this isn't just limited to our educational system. This is also expanding into our labor system, and what kind of implications will that have to employers all over the state of Alabama, and what alternatives do you as an employee have if you all of a sudden don't have your employer who's willing to comply with your Section 504 disability. You know, so that's something to consider as well.
We got this email question from Deb. Deb says, I don't understand what the alternative will be for 504 students. Will they open alternative schools or classrooms for them instead of being mainstreamed? Can somebody explain that?
So in public education, we can't group like disabilities together. Everyone has fair access to the entire gamut of education. Not to say that there isn't benefits of having certain schools that specialize. You know, having a school for the blind would not be a terrible idea because they could accommodate the blind better than having an entire school system try to do it for varying kids. But a public school system cannot do that. So if the 504s went away, that is an option that the community would stand up a school that could offer the accommodations, or like I said, I think schools, the majority will try their best to be good stewards and do everything they need to still.
We got this question. Are there any laws currently on the books that will punish parents who have a child that brings a gun to school? We had this happen just a couple of weeks ago.
And that's been
locally.
in the news too in other states where, you know, the kid brings a gun to school and obviously a shootout. And now the parents up in another state were actually indicted on different charges and are pushing forward towards a trial. But do we have that kind of law on the books here in the state of Alabama?
Unfortunately, no, we do not. There is a bill that has been pre-filed, House Bill 109, which is trying to criminalize parents whose children bring a weapon to school. Minor children, it would be a misdemeanor charge. There's a lot of opposition to it because, you know, what's the age limit? If that child steals a weapon and brings it at age 18 and the parents don't even know, should they be liable? There's a lot of legality there, which I think you could speak to more about that. But I will say there was a gun incident last week at my child's school, and the feedback from the parents is they do want people held accountable for these type of incidences because the only reason we had a gun incident was because a child was able to access a weapon. Yeah. And so I think everyone who is a parent in today's world is just tired of it continuously happening, and they want something to change.
Yeah, and I think that's just really wanting what's best for your child. And as a parent, I mean, obviously, I want the school that my child goes to Riverton Intermediate School. And so obviously we want our child when they go to school to be safe. We want to feel like they're safe and in a safe environment, and my child wants to feel like she's in a safe environment. And of course, these are things that when I was going through school back in the 80s and 90s, we focused on tornado drills and we didn't have active shooter drills. So the world is a lot different now. And the question is what kind of steps can we take? And I, do understand that this is a bill that's working its way towards the House, and there's some indication it may or may not pass at this point in time. But it is a step that our legislators are taking to try to find solutions. And I understand putting metal detectors in schools is another solution that is being implemented. And so as we move forward, there are some other strategies that may be able to be taken, like for instance, civil liability. Yeah. If you don't properly maintain your gun, and somebody who shouldn't have a gun is allowed access to it, that's access to a dangerous instrumentality and can subject you to civil penalties. Yeah. The question is, of course, the damage is already done by the time it comes to my office, and I have to file a lawsuit because some child's hurt or somebody's been hurt by a wrongful discharge of a firearm, which we've handled those types of cases, and they're devastating.
If you give your car to somebody who shouldn't be driving, you can be in trouble, right?
That's right.
You can get sued. Somebody has written in, they're asking whether this would affect adult handicapped people.
Yes.
So this law, how so? How would it?
So
how could it possibly?
The 504, like we've said, it goes all the way. It covers you for life. An IEP covers you just while you're in an educational setting.
Okay.
The 504 is the accommodations that cover someone for life.
What is an IEP?
An IEP is it's from the IDEA law, which states that students who have profound disabilities that impact their learning should receive both the accommodations that are covered by the 504 and additional services to assist them in their learning endeavor. So in this particular case, it could be services such as behavioral. It could be services such as, additional math time with a specialized instructor, reteaching. There's things like that can help your students succeed in spite of their disability. And so that's why that's a little bit different. But the accommodations are covered either path. But the IEP is services related.
We've got Linda on the line with a question from Harvest. Hi, Linda. Thanks for calling. What's your question tonight?
Yes,
or comment?
I am calling concerning the incident that happened at Challenger, I believe it is, where the student brought a gun to school.
Yeah.
And apparently at this time, no one has been held responsible for it. Now, my question is, if that gun, when that gun went off, it hit a computer or whatever, backpack.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Now, if that bullet had happened to have hit the student and the student unfortunately had been maimed or killed or whatever, who would be held responsible for that incident since the school system has a weapon on campus? It doesn't seem as though they applied that ruling to that situation. So why have that ruling? If you're not going to enforce it, then you need to find some other way before we have a mass shooting.
No, we agree, and who is responsible in that kind of scenario is, unfortunately in the state of Alabama and pretty much all the 50 states in the United States, there's a concept called sovereign immunity. And a school system, it doesn't have a civil liability or criminal liability for a situation like that if the school system was found to be in some part responsible, because that would be suing the state, and you can't do that. In terms of how that child was allowed to get the weapon, I think that's kind of what we're talking about, is that there's a bill that is being pushed forth into the House right now that would seek to find responsibility against the parents who allow their minor child access to a firearm. Because one of the things that we've got to do, or we got to find a way so that these children don't have access to firearms that they put in their backpack when they're, what grade was it?
Second.
When they're in second grade and they carry a firearm to school. So this is something that I believe that we have in place some detection systems at Challenger, or we're in the process of doing that?
Yes, weapons detection. So unfortunately, we can't. We don't parent these children. We don't see them outside of the school hours. We can only do what we can do, which is hardening our buildings and adding more security. Unfortunately, weapons are prevalent in our society, and children are getting their hands on them. So now we have to put weapons detection systems in, and evaluate all 24,000 kids every day just to make sure that one isn't carrying one.
Linda, we've got a few seconds left. What do you think ought to be done? Who do you think ought to be responsible? We may have lost Linda. We've lost Linda already.
Does Challenger require clear backpacks? I mean, is that something that you?
No, it is something that has come up in the after actions that it might be something that parents are interested in us pursuing.
Okay, gotcha.
We're going to take a break. Be right back talking more about education in Alabama. Stay with us. If you didn't get your questions answered tonight, here's how to get in touch with Andrea Alvarez with the Board of Education, andrea.alvarez@hsv-k12.org. Here's how to get in touch with Heath Brooks with Timberlake League and Brooks in Huntsville, 256-536-0770 or 800-804-2502. The website is law-injury.com, and if you like them on Facebook, you can learn more about the law that way.
And if you need to talk with Sharon Doviet, she does family law, that's child custody, divorces, adoptions, and the like. She can be reached at 256-539-7337 or www.sharonfamilylaw.com.
If I don't have kids in the system, is it still beneficial to me? Is this still an issue I ought to be worried about?
Oh, yes. I think having 504s, having accommodations for disabled people in our community is just so imperative, not to mention how that goes. You know, you never know. At some point you might be stricken with blindness. You might have hearing loss as you age. It is important that we pay attention that just our lifestyle right now doesn't necessitate what we're going to need in the future. I never thought I'd have a disabled child. We need to realize that we got to take care of everybody in our community.
Thanks for all your calls and questions. See you next week.